I'm Scott, and I'm the director here. Kay and Lynn have asked me to talk about our program here at the center, and also how I view the family program and how it relates to what we're doing at the center. So the first thing I want to say before, so I don't forget to say it, is that I cannot begin to express how important it is for families to be educated and to experience their own transformation to help the people struggling with addiction. I frankly don't think I truly understood that, which is an odd thing to say because I grew up in a family with lots of addiction. And I think I was falling for a long time into so many patterns that people fall into, trying to deal with not only my own addiction, but my mom and my brothers and my nephews and my all that, alcohol and drugs and everything else. I think I made a lot of sort of mistakes through the years. And I think I became more and more educated as I began to write about addiction, slowly. But I don't think I really became educated until I opened the center. I think that's when I had the enlightenment experience around family. And what it is because I was doing intake calls for the center for the first year. The director's doing intake calls because we were fairly small operation. And I got to talk to families, and I understood and heard their pain from the other side. And a lot of compassion for that. Not just because I knew what they were going through, but because I had gone through a lot of that myself, being on both sides of the addiction game, being the one who was addicted and also at some point trying to help somebody in my family or several people in my family. The amount of pain during those intake calls is enormous, and just a sense of frustration, like I don't know how to deal with this person anymore. Just really, literally at the end of one's rope a lot of times. And at the same time, I did notice a lot of patterns that were actually enabling the addict, even though it was coming from love. And I truly think that most things in families do come from love, even if they're a little bit skewed. They do come from a place of love, but they come from a lack of education about the nature of addiction and about what's helpful and what's harmful for family members. Just to give you a few examples, I would have somebody call and say, hey, I've got a daughter who's strung out on heroin, and I'd like to get her into treatment. And then as we talked more, I would find out, well, mom is paying for the apartment, mom's paying for the car, or dad is employing the son, even though there are a multitude of employee issues. Dad won't fire the son and won't put down any boundaries or anything. And so, thinking back when I was addicted, it's like, that's great. Like, if I get to do drugs, I get to ruin my body and my health, and I get to ruin all the relationships in my life or damage them, and you're going to pay me for it. And that's a hard one to get because I think money is one way that we show love. We think if we give the person money, we're going to keep them from experiencing some pain, and I suppose that's what does happen is that they don't get to experience that rock bottom that addicts need to experience in order to turn their life around. So just learning that whole learning process of doing intake and then working with people was really helpful to me, and it really did enlighten me around how it has to be the whole family that heals. And then also when clients would come to the center, I would notice that clients would start to change in dramatic ways. They got clearer around their own self-esteem issues and their addiction and everything. But then when they went back or they communicated with family, the family were still in the old patterns of enabling, rescuing, overfunctioning. All the patterns that you've probably learned about if you've been in the family program. And so what that does is because the dynamics in the family haven't changed, it almost welcomes the addict to kind of go back into the old patterns. Those are the same patterns that help lead to addiction in the first place. So without healing the whole family and educating the whole family, really it's hard for us to heal and educate our clients. I've also seen, just since we've had the family program, real changes in terms of families who do become educated and do start to look at their role in it and how that has helped clients tremendously. I could give examples, but just trust me when I say that when the whole family is involved, the clients just have much better. So, what else? I was thinking about how to talk about what we do here at the center, because that's another thing that Kay and Lynn wanted me to talk about. And there's so many different directions I could go in to talk about that, but what came up for me was something I read years ago about the difference between transformation and information. They're very, very distinct things. Information is just information. It's not That's not just information, but it's only that. It's not transformation necessarily. So information is when you become educated about something. And information is a big part of what we do here. So we inform our clients about how to become trauma informed so that they understand the link between trauma and other underlying issues as it relates to addiction. So it's information. So we have books out there that we require them to read. We have groups where we talk about how addiction affects the brain, how it affects families, how it's linked to underlying issues, and just education about how to stay clean. Because, for people who've been addicted to drugs, staying clean itself is a whole new game. So there's education or information that has to come from us to them to help them lead a better life. But I don't think that information is enough. I certainly do not. In fact, I think that the transformation side is where the rubber meets the road. So where information is just information, it's giving you information that you need to be educated on about how addiction plays in the family and the brain and relapse prevention, all that. Transformation is actually changing the patterns within your body and mind that you've been living on for many years. One of the patterns that we talk about here is just how, certainly how some of the roles that Kay talks about, how they show up as one's identity, although we might use different phraseology here. So where she might use overfunctioning, underfunctioning, or enabling and rescuing. In a private session, we might not ever use those terminologies. We may actually instead look at what is the person mirroring back about who you are. So if mom is overbearing or over functioning or rescuing, what is that mirroring back about who I am? And it could be things like, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, any number of what we call deficiency stories. So then we use our inquiries to help people see through those stories, to see that that's not really who they are. They're just conditioned patterns that they were given when they were younger, but by way of relationship, and that they repeated over their lifespan. And so that they've actually grown up with the idea that they're fundamentally flawed or deficient or worthless or whatever else. And everything else they accumulated along the way, not just from mom and dad, but from society and culture. And so with the transformation part is we literally unstick those thoughts from the emotions that make them feel true. So if I have a belief that I somehow inherited from my social or family environment that I'm fundamentally unlovable, which was my story really, then I replay that pattern over in my life so that I'm actually attracting on some level people who will confirm that identity for me. Because it's who I think I am at some core level. If I have those thoughts, but I don't feel the Velcro emotion to them or the sensation, then I don't actually really believe the thoughts on any real level. They're just like thoughts. They just come through like a wisp of wind and they leave. And there's no sense of grasping after the thought as if it's true or it's me. What we do is we unstick those thoughts from the emotions so that people can come down and feel the emotions that they've been trying to avoid for so many years. And there's also great pain associated with these stories, unfelt feelings that have been avoided for many years. And as they face those emotions and rest with them and do some inquiry around them and really just welcome them, actually, instead of pushing them away, then that unsticking of that Velcro, you guys have probably heard about the Velcro, the unsticking of that, if you do it repeatedly, changes how somebody views themselves so that they don't identify with those roles or identities as strongly or at all if they go deep. And what that does is frees them from the patterns that are sticky in their relationship, so that if mom comes back and tries to do the old pattern again, it's not hitting anything, or you see what I'm saying? It doesn't work as much because I don't feel fundamentally unlovable anymore. So therefore, that's not going to work for me, which forces mom either to find somebody else to do that with, or to change, to transform herself or himself, or love her, or whatever. So our work very much works in relationship already, because it's built on trying to find out how people are mirroring back certain identities that are creating these sticky patterns in their life, and then undoing those identities. And a lot of other things too with the work. I mean, it's not just working on these core deficient identities, but also working with trauma. So a lot of people come with trauma from childhood, which could be anything from sexual abuse to loss of a parent or abandonment, rejection, an overly critical mother, which created trauma in the system. And, it's a kind of a word that we use so much now. In some ways, I feel like the definition is much, much broader than I ever thought, because I think before people have thought, well, PTSD, or, that's for the war veterans, the shell shock, or that's for somebody who was, like sexually abused. But if you look at the nature of trauma, because we're so sensitive, all of us, even the ones that pretend not to be, are so sensitive to our environment and to other people and events. And this, we're also emotional beings. We can never really try not to be that, because we are very much emotional beings. But yet in our culture, we don't learn how to process emotions from an early age in a healthy way. So if there's a traumatic event, which is overwhelmingly fearful or scary or anger-producing or shame-producing, our system has designed itself, in some ways very thankfully, to shut down because it's just too much. And I used to think, well, I know it's a really bad thing that the system does that, but now I know better, because my own trauma, when I shut down around it after being bullied when I was in 6th grade, I didn't have the system that was capable of actually feeling all of the stuff. I felt completely isolated and alone and scared, and I felt like the whole world had turned on me. And that kind of deep-seated fear, it will shake your body. It's just, if you don't have the skills to deal with it, it'll just really rack your body. And I in some ways, I think that our systems are designed in order to protect us for something that we don't have the skills to deal with at that time, and it does a pretty good job of it. But there's so many ramifications to that, because then later on, because you haven't processed something in a healthy way, many people reach out towards addictions, alcohol, drugs, sugar, as a way to medicate and continue to suppress that unprocessed emotion. So a big part of what we're doing is trauma first, which means in the first few weeks or more, we just deal with the trauma at a pace that works for the individual. Because some people can go fast, some people slow. And then after we work with the trauma, then we kind of start to work in the patterns of the deficiency stories, the identities that I was talking about, and then also with anxiety, just general stress and anxiety and addictive cravings, things like that. So that's all the transformation path. The transformation is really the inquiry, the mindfulness. Kate does EMDR, that's part of the transformation track. In some cases, medication is part of it. Good sleep is part of it. If they need TMS or something, that's part of it. Naltrexone, which is a drug that reduces cravings, is part of it. So we have a whole part of our system is just the transformation track. And that's the kind of the experiential work that we do. And the family program has the 2 tracks too, although I don't know if they talk about it that way, because you have Kay educating you about family systems and roles, and she's really giving you information. But there's also transformation involved. I know that you do private sessions. There's private sessions, and you may or may not do some group work.
We do some group work too.
Yeah. So that's the transformation part. So the thing that I've learned is that you have to have both. You have to have both the information and the transformation to really heal and